further ado, I think we'll have Izolda tell us all about how to speak our words. You ready?
I am ready. I do have one achievement.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, totally fine. The most recent audiobooks I recorded just came out in the beginning of October, so that was my achievement. It wasn't a writing achievement so much, but I record audiobooks, and so the most recent one came out October 1st, and it's out in the world. And I got a really interesting email from somebody who heard one of my demos, and one of my demos is very seductive, sort of slow, delicious sounding kind of thing, and it's from the book Like Water for Chocolate. And that seems to be getting me most of my gigs right now, which is interesting. And so the lady who wrote to me said, I just wanted to let you know your voice was so beautiful, creamy, and seductive. I'm not sure that you want to be into recording my stuff because I mostly write lesbian erotica, but and I was like, and I said, nothing wrong with voicing lesbian erotica. That would be fun. So I thought that was just adorable. I was like, okay, sure, no problem. But yeah, so apparently that's my demographic now. Apparently.
I have one too.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
I dropped the ball.
Let's see. This was just 2-3 weeks ago, and Capblade is a science fiction writers conference. It's anybody that's trying to paranormal science fiction horror. Held in Gaithersburg, and it seems to be so every year. By the way, DC is strongly in the running for the 2016 World Science Fiction Conference.
World Cup.
Yeah, World Cup.
Wow, really?
Strong running. It's Stockholm
Okay.
or Washington, D.C. area, which may be Gaithersburg because we're kind of considering that. But anyway, 3-day conference. It was like $60 for the 3 days just to go to it. Met a lot of people. Met publishers, vendors. I met indie publishers and magazine people. A lot of classes to go to every day to learn how to write. And the panels were by writers, by science fiction writers. And so just we got resources like that in Washington that we just don't know. I just found out about this. And then there was in Baltimore, Austin Camacho, his Divas, his book Divas came, had the 3C conference. That's just for
Creatures, crimes, and creativity.
same thing. Larry Matthews was on the panel. They're having another one next year. Apparently was very successful. So Baltimore does more than us. It seems that way.
Yeah.
And of course, there's Balticon.
And Balticon, yeah.
Baltimore Science Fiction Convention.
They're very active. All kinds of stuff every month.
Would you like one for more introduction?
No, are you sure? I'm positive.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Izolda. I can introduce myself. And I have a little bio in the presentation because I think I approach what we're about to do from a number of different perspectives. And so with any luck, by the time we're done, we're going to have all of you having a number of different perspectives on how to approach your written work as far as getting it out there. Now, or how do we move the computer? Can you see okay? I'm fine. Okay. Is that better? Can you see? Yeah. Okay. All right. So, first of all, forgive the lack of big projection. We had a technological issue. We've been saying, technology is awesome until it doesn't work, and then you're kind of in a position of having to be adaptable. So, we're going to be talking about how to essentially bring your written work alive when you read it out loud. Before we go do that, why would we? Why would we want to present our written work out loud ever? What do you think?
Book readings.
Book readings, yeah.
If you were at a presentation and you had to share a story.
Yeah, for
If
your
you're at
presentation,
school.
yeah, share a story, absolutely. Were you Obi-Wan or were you Luke Skywalker?
Obi.
Okay, I'm going to call you Obi-Wan and you Luke Skywalker, just so you know. Yeah, Mike?
Pitch fests?
Pitch fests, absolutely. So if you're going to any kind of a conference to pitch your work, sure.
Audiobooks.
Audiobooks. If you're reading your own audiobook, or if you're like me, in addition to reading your own, you do other people's, absolutely. What else?
Reading to your wife.
Ooh. You know, it's really funny. I was doing some work with a woman the other day who wanted me to coach her on accents because she and her husband have a nightly read fest where she reads to him over really good Ethiopian coffee.
Oh,
And so she really wanted to have that kind of, let me do it in all the possible accents that need to be done when we read these books to each other. Yeah.
Reading your book for yourself, just to hear how it sounds.
Ooh, yes, absolutely. If you read out loud, that's the best way to tell yourself and show yourself whether or not your work actually makes sense to the reading audience.
Yeah, I was gonna say editing.
Editing, yeah.
Or if you write kids' books, reading kids is great.
Absolutely. They'll tell you right away whether or not it's good. Absolutely, they don't hold back. Any other reasons? What do you think? Podcasting, absolutely. And in addition to that, interviewing. So if you're being interviewed by someone, knowing how you're going to approach your work out loud and speaking about the work and perhaps doing a reading, like for example, an audio interview or a podcast, or if you get on TV or cable or anything like that, it's always really good to have that kind of experience. And also preparation. We're going to talk a lot about what you need to do to prepare to read your work out loud. Any other reasons that you can think of?
A trailer.
Trailer, sure. If you're going in to pitch for any kind of an agent, or if you decide to turn your book into a movie, you're going to be pitching it like crazy also. That's another reason to be able to, because they often will go, give us a paragraph, and then to make things a little bit more funny, they'll go, can you give us a different read? And so not only do you have to read what you've written, but you also have to have sort of a light on your feet kind of way of thinking about it so that you can give them multiple ways of approaching whatever work you've done. Even though you as the author have it in your head, it's good to have that flexibility in order to be able to say and do whatever it is you're being asked to say and do in the moment. Does that make sense? Okay, so we've already talked about some of those ways, as part of the first question, but what are some of those ways to present the work out loud? Or do you think we haven't covered? Sure. If you're presenting at a festival, you absolutely need to be able to do that. You need to be able to present your work, and sometimes even other people's work, especially if you're sort of shanghaied to be the MC somehow. And that will, as soon as they know that you know how to present your work out loud, they'll talk to you about it and go, oh, come do this. And being, again, flexible as far as how you're going to use your voice, and physically flexible within this part of your body, which we're going to talk about in a minute, will help you be able to do that. So my bio, this is who I am, and I don't know if y'all can read it. What I did is I have a two-pronged approach. You all can see this. I can see it on here. So I have a little tiny one that shows me my own thing. So I am a voice actor. I've done audiobooks. I've done movies for NASA and the National Geographic Society. I've done tons of voiceovers and narrations. I love that. Ooh, back there, Obi-Wan was like, ooh, NASA, cool. Yeah, so you can see me or hear me on movies and things like that for different organizations, the American Academy for the Advancement of Science, et cetera, et cetera. And I've recently gotten into doing audiobooks. And so, as I said, the second one just came out. I'm also a teacher. I teach voice and singing and public speaking. And I've been doing that for over 20 years. So I have a fair amount of experience helping people sort of bring their voices out. And when you're singing, you're doing it one way. When you're speaking, you're doing it almost identically, actually, with just a few slight changes, because we don't tend to speak like this when we're presenting our work out loud. Unless, as was the second audiobook I just did, there was a song in the audiobook. And I had to sing the song in the audiobook as part of the audiobook recording. So you might find yourself having to do that. If you, as the author, decide to record your own audiobook and you have a song in it, be aware you're going to need to sing as part of this. And I also do corporate team building workshops around singing and around speaking and helping people as teams develop their function, their creativity, their individuality, and also how to be cohesive as a team as part of using their voices and projecting, producing sound, working together, and really coming up with the way that they're going to move forward in their projects. And then that this is sort of two prongs. And then the third prong of what I do is that I am an author also. I have 2 books out. The first one is a self-improvement book called Life Elements. And the second one is my first in the series of an urban fantasy novel called the Fairy Godmother Diary series. So I have that combination of being a writer and also being someone who presents work out loud. And that's why I think this is a really important way of looking at what authors can do for ourselves. Because we as authors often aren't the most extroverted of people, so we need a little bit of guidance and help on how to get out there, how to actually be confident enough and have the physical ability to present the work. This is what this is all about. Questions on that? Okay. Let's see. Will it work? Yes. All right, so here's the thing. When you're just reading a book, the person doing the reading basically imagines the entire world, the sights, the sounds, the flavors, the textures, everything that's going on, the reader's going to imagine. Obi-Wan is back there nodding his head vigorously. I love it. In movies and TV, we get the visuals and the sounds. So we get the whole enchilada, right? We basically get everything handed to us. How it looks and how it sounds are all brought to us on a platter, essentially. When it's an audiobook, when the narration has to be the thing, gee, frog. It's gone? I hope it's gone. The voice has to bring the entire world to life. So if it's a fiction book, you're going to actually have to do everything in the book to color the world. So you bring the world to the reader, only it's your take. As the author, it's really your take. It's how you envision the world. And that becomes really important, because if you have a vision of the world you created, and you don't feel quite confident enough to actually bring that world out, then you're forever going to look at your audiobook as something that you didn't do quite as well as you wanted to. What I say instead is look at it as, if it's your vision, what you choose to bring is something that you can learn to bring, provided you have some techniques that you learn about how to make it happen. That's when you really start making the book come to life for yourself, and it's your vision. Because it's your vision, you get to do it the way you want. Does that make sense? Questions on that? Okay, because no one knows the world that you created better than you do in your book, it's going to be really great to have that presented with your voice. If it's a nonfiction book, generally speaking, nonfiction books are going to be trying to illustrate something, show something, or convince people of something, or help them do something. That too is something that you can bring your vision to, especially as a nonfiction author. What you're trying to help people achieve or learn comes through in no way better than if you're the one who's doing it yourself. Does that make sense? Questions on that? Okay. So the objectives for this wee little workshop, we're going to actually start voicing our characters. Did everybody bring a paragraph? I asked everybody to bring a paragraph. Janice is sweet. That's okay, you don't have to. What we're going to do is we're actually going to bring out, and I'm going to ask you to spend a little time writing on the back of your agenda. We're going to bring out what our characters are in the little paragraph. Does everybody have dialogue in their paragraphs? I asked you for dialogue.
I don't write fiction, so.
That's okay. If you don't, that's fine too. Because then it's your voice, Alex, and that's great too. So yeah, it doesn't have to be dialogue. Dialogue is helpful because if you are going to ever be writing in different voices, it's good to have that bit of experience doing this exercise we're going to do. We're going to apply good vocal technique when reading our work out loud, and then we're going to do a little bit of work about developing the confidence and enthusiasm to bring out the authentic reading. And I think that's a really good part of this, is that most people, if they have any issue as far as reading the work out loud, it's standing up in front of people who are watching them, who are kind of doing this. Okay, bring it. And you have to stand up and you have to read your work and you get nervous. And the thing is, really, they're not out to see you fail. And we have to remember that. When people come to hear you read, they're not out to see you fail. They're not out to heckle you. They're out to hear what your vision is. They're out to actually know what it is you're trying to say. And because of that, we can develop a connection with our audience that will allow us incredible access and connection to the people who like our work. Because people who don't like your work aren't going to show up. People who are interested in your work are going to be the ones who show up. And those are the people you can then, quite frankly, book in by allowing it to be, again, your voice that brings the vision. Okay. Now, having said all that, I believe speaking and also singing by extension should be Olympic sports because what's your instrument? Your entire body. Everything you do, everything you are, comes out and needs to be utilized when you speak or project or do anything as far as your work out to an audience. So I'm going to ask you, it's funny that you just sat down because I'm going to actually ask you to stand up. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to actually do a physical warm-up that's going to allow us the ability to have our instrument, our bodies, our voices, our muscles, everything, be prepared to do the presentation. First thing to do is we want to oxygenate the blood. We want to get our bodies moving a little, so I'm asking you questions.
That's much exercise.
You gotta do what you gotta do. So here's what I'm asking you to do, okay? You ready? Okay. It's still moving your body, even though it's not moving. There you go. Okay, so in the real world, you can do this for about 2 minutes. Get yourself up and moving, and then go ahead and relax and stop. When you stand to read, you want to stand so that your feet are about hip width apart. Hip width means you're going to take a look at the second toe of your foot, and you're going to run an imaginary line from the second toe through the center of the ankle, through the center of the knee, to your hip points. Okay? So we seldom want to stand like this to read. We almost always want to stand so that our body is nice and stacked, one on top of the other. Everything, all the bones, all the muscles, everything being sort of as centered as they possibly can be, because when they are centered, our body is actually really nicely in place so that everything else can be used to express creatively. Does that make sense? Anybody want to do a quick exercise with me? Okay, come on over here. Here's the thing. If you are centered, you are strong. If you are not centered, you are not strong, even though you think you are. Okay? So, are you ready? So, centered, hip apart. I'm going to take your arms and I'm going to raise them straight centered out of your shoulders, just like this. Okay? Now, I want you to see, are you centered? Do you feel like your arms are coming straight out of your shoulders? Make a fist. And I want you to be really super strong and don't let me bring your hands together. Ready? Don't let me bring them together, no matter what I do. Ready? Set? Go. Okay, she's nice and strong. Now the same thing, I'm going to put her off center by a little bit. No more than about 1.5 inches. Okay? Make yourself super strong. Don't let me bring your hands together no matter what. Ready? Okay. Okay? You felt like you were pretty strong, didn't you? Yeah. But you weren't. And this is the point. Thank you very much. This is the point of doing this kind of centering, is that when we feel we are strong, and we are strong and centered, we have a lot of ability to actually project out. As soon as we are not quite centered, like Susan will tell you, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? It's like you think you're strong, but you're not. As soon as you're off center even a little bit, your body's actually using a lot of energy to keep you upright, to keep you stable, and then a lot of the other parts that you would need to actually speak and project and connect with your audience are being used to instead keep you upright. So bear that in mind when you're standing to present. Always be nice and centered. Questions on that? Okay, so the rest of the warm-up, we're going to do a little bit of breathing. So I want you to go ahead and put your hands on your bellies. And I want you to take in a nice deep breath. Inhale in and exhale. And inhale in and exhale. Now I'm noticing a lot of people have this happening. Their shoulders are going up and then they're lowering. And the problem with that is that what it looks like is you're getting this amazingly huge breath, right? But watch what happens. You take a huge breath, or what looks like a huge breath. Watch. That was as much air as I could take in from down here. So what you want to imagine is that your body is like a submarine. You have a submarine sitting in your belly, okay? And then there is a periscope, and the periscope comes out, and the actual viewing chamber, if you will, is your mouth. So if you stand like this, periscope won't work. If you stand like this, periscope won't work. Standing nice and centered and imagining that we're breathing into the submarine and then allowing this to come out. The submarine periscope doesn't stretch, so we don't want the shoulders up. Keep the shoulders nice and down with the submarine expand, and take a nice inhale. And the shoulders stay down, and then exhale, and the shoulders stay down again, and this contracts. Does that make sense? So that when we're doing this, when we're inhaling and exhaling, and you might notice you get a little lightheaded because we're doing some deeper breathing now, be careful about that. And the other thing I need to tell everybody, when you're standing to present, do not lock your knees. Okay? There is a tendency for us, standing straight up, to lock our knees. That's a surefire way to pass out. I did it in 8th grade. I was standing on the 3rd riser in choir, and I'm hyperextended, so I locked my knees naturally and fell over, and there's a scar back here from hitting my head on the floor. So you want to watch out for that as well. So nice standing and deep breath. Keep going that way. And remember, if you feel at all lightheaded, because you might, go ahead and sit down. And now we're going to actually do a little bit of wonky kind of stretching. I want you to inhale and interlace your hands behind you and stretch down and back. And the reason you're doing this is because when we speak, we tend to speak in one general pitch area, one general high or low part. As you are reading, you're going to be wanting to modulate. Sometimes you'll be speaking higher, sometimes you'll be speaking lower. When you're speaking lower, you're going to be speaking down on what they call the chest voice. So go ahead and release, and put your hands right on your chest, and make a little low in your voice, go puff, puff, puff. Can you feel sort of vibrations happening in your chest? Now I want you to go way higher and go puff, puff, puff. Can you feel the vibrations still in your chest? No, they went away. The chest voice, the low part of our range, is actually down in here, and you're getting sympathetic vibrations. I love Obi-Wan Kenobi over there. So the sympathetic vibrations are going to be in the low part of our range. That's the chest voice. As soon as we go up, if you put your head here, you don't have to. If you put your hands here, you'll actually feel the vibrations up in the higher part. So as you do this, be aware that where you are speaking needs to also be well exercised and warmed up. If you're going to be speaking mostly low in your voice, this area needs to be nice and warmed up. If you're going to be speaking mostly high in your voice, this area needs to be warmed up. And how you warm up these areas, you're going to take the pads of your fingers and you're going to tap the top of your head, because that is a resonating chamber for your voice. The voice will actually go way up in here. If you're talking up here, let's say you're doing children's books, for example, if you're doing children's books narrations, a lot of voices will be high, or low if it's a character that requires that. So there will be lots of different voices when you're doing children's books. If you're trying to convince people of something, you almost never want to speak like this, because it doesn't sound quite as certain as someone who's speaking down low in their voice. So again, you want to make sure that all of that is warmed up and ready to present. Then you're going to take your fingertips and you're going to massage your forehead and your eyebrows and down into your temples and your chin, nose, lips, teeth, and your throat. The throat is very important. And then down into the chest, and do the same thing. That's why you stretch that area. Good. And now you're going to keep standing nice and straight and drop your head down. Now you're not bending your head as much as you're trying to see your belly button. So you're elongating the back of your neck. And then you're now bring your right ear towards your right shoulder, pull down with that left arm. And then the same thing, other side. Remember not to lock your knees. And come back to center, and now shoulder rolls. You're going to raise them up, back, down, and forward. Up, back, down, and forward. And again, nothing too drastic. We're going nice and slow, not hurting ourselves. And then the same thing other direction. Good. Keep on and going. 2 more times. Good. And now I want you to make a teeny tiny face. Little face. Now big face. Small face. Large face. And then itty bitty face. And then big face. Why are we doing this? What do you think?
Or the muscles of the face.
Yeah. And you want to be sure that you have access to all of those muscles, because boy, when you're up there and you're reading or speaking, you need to be sure that you're really warmed up so that you have something that is accessible to you. Your instrument needs to be very accessible to you as you're doing this. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. One more little thing. Anybody know how to make, Alex, you will know how to make horse noise. Do you know how to make horse noise? There you go. Yeah, exactly. So everybody go ahead and put your hands on your belly one more time. I'm going to make that horse noise. The way to do it, you bring your lips together, kind of like duck lips. It's funny that you use duck lips to make the horse noise, but there it is. Duck lips, inhale, and then blow through the lips. Always makes my nose tickle to do that. Why did we just do that? What do y'all think? Yeah, need this whole area to be super loose and ready to go. Does that make sense? And, oh, Alex is yawning, and that's fabulous. We love yawning. Whenever you start breathing more deeply, yawns start happening, and you'll all find yourself wanting to yawn now that somebody else is yawning. That's great. Does anybody have any questions on this warm-up? And yawning, that's great. Yawning is great. Here's what I've done for you all. The first page of the little handout that I have is actually this warm-up that we just did. The bottom of that first page is a set of audio files, and you can go ahead and sit, please, if you want to. We're pretty much done with that part. And by the way, standing to speak and sitting to speak are very similar. When you sit, you're going to want a straight spine. You're going to be flat on the floor, roughly hip width apart. So it's very similar to the standing posture that we're using when we speak. A little bit different in that you're sitting, but the rest, the stacked spine, everything relaxed and warmed up, is still going to need to be how you approach reading your work, even if you're sitting. Does that make sense? Okay. So anyway, the files that are on there, if you give me your email address, I will send you the link to basically what we just did. It's a set of audio files. Yes?
It's recording, so we'll also add it to wherever you put the video.
Awesome. Nice. Look at that. I love having... This is Mike, by the way. He's incredible, and he's a fantastic movie director, author, videographer, you name it. He's amazing. Anyway, so the thing about doing this is it's nicer if somebody sort of leads you along or guides you along. So those audio files are available to you, and you can have them and use them to your heart's content. So they'll just be available to you. You can either sign up this way, or you can go on the website and find IzoldaVoice.com. Yeah.
How do you actually warm up the throat, the voice?
Yeah, we're going to get to that. That happens just a little bit later. I just wanted to have you warm up the body first, and then there's all sorts of ways we're going to warm up the voice itself. Okay, questions so far, other than that one, which sort of is going to lead me to the next set of things that we're going to do. Okay. Did I do it? No. Okay, so how do you feel now? Good?
Relaxed.
Relaxed? Yes, Luke Skywalker's giving me the thumbs up. Nice. Did you guys do the warm-up too?
I did some of it.
Awesome, did I. Awesome. Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan have given me the seal of approval. I'm so excited. Yeah, no, if you knew the kind of Star Wars nerd I am, you would understand why that's a big deal. Okay, so if you feel like you're warmed up, there are a couple of other little exercises that you can do for yourself as far as listening and speaking that are going to help present and also take in whatever some other people are saying. One of the best ways to do this, if you want to listen a little better, or if you find that your attention is kind of flagging a little bit, you're kind of doing this. Take your fingertips, take your earlobes, and rub your earlobes. I'm actually quite serious. Rub your earlobes, because what you're doing is you're sensitizing the nerves. And then go ahead and stop, and you're going to find that you hear me a little bit better now, because you've sensitized the nerves, and they basically take sound waves a little bit better now than they did before. So that's a really nice way of being able to hear better, just in general. You know, just anytime you need to listen or hear a little bit better, this is a great way to do it. And it doesn't take any time. Then, what I've had other people say to me, and I've trained people on how to do this, how to read your work out loud, or how to do presentations, what I would hear people say is, I don't really know what I sound like. You know, what do I sound like? And we do sound quite different to ourselves versus to the outside world. So I'm going to give you a little exercise. If you ever want to know what you sound like to the outside world, this is a much better representation. I'm going to ask you to take your hands like this, and you're going to take one hand, and you're going to, does anybody have an ear they hear not so well with? Are you all pretty good? Because it won't work if you have one ear that's a little bit wonky. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to start saying the alphabet, and you're going to slowly bring your hands up. Don't do it yet. You're going to slowly bring your hands up to here, and one hand is going to be here, one hand is going to be right at your ear, and then you're going to sort of play a little bit and see where you can basically bounce the sound off the hand near your mouth to the hand that's near your ear, and it will give you a nice accurate representation of what you sound like. Here's the thing. Most of the time, the resonance sits inside our head, so we sound bigger, fuller, deeper to ourselves than we do to people who are who are outside of us. This is a nice way to bounce everything forward. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say the alphabet, and you're going to slowly bring your hands up, and right about J, you want to be here so that you can play for a little bit, and at T, we're going to start pulling it away. Okay? So So ready? We're going to start with alphabet, and it's going to be just like A, B, C. Ready? And A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Did you hear yourselves a little better? Isn't that interesting?
And you have to play with it for a while.
Oh, yeah, you do. And the point is, it's going to be a little bit different. Where you actually hear better is going to be a little bit different for everybody, but it's a really nice way to get yourself into that space of, this is what I sound like. Because often what happens to people is they have a kind of a bit of a shock. What you think you sound like versus what you actually sound like to other people is quite different, and so people go, oh, that's too different, I'm not sure I can do that. And the point is to get ourselves as accustomed to it as possible, so that when we do have to present our work in public, that we can. Yeah?
How long do these warm-ups last before you start? In other words, when should you do this before you start speaking? Immediately, 5 minutes, 20 minutes?
The whole warm-up is going to take you probably about 8,
Yeah,
7 to
but
8 minutes.
the
No,
effect-
no, I'm trying to give you a time frame.
Okay.
So about 7 to 8 minutes. So I would say within a half an hour, if you start, by about 20 minutes, you should still be warmed up. So that if you have a presentation to do at 10, I would say somewhere between 9:30 and 9:40, do the warm-ups, and then you have about 20 minutes where it will last. And then after that, if you don't speak for a while, you probably want to re-warm up.
Okay.
And warming up takes a while. In other words, you do these exercises, and it's cool to have them, but it's not necessarily going to give you all of the warm-up. And when I sing, for example, it takes me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to feel like I'm really warmed up. And I don't mean doing warm-ups. I mean, I'll do warm-ups for about 20 to 25 minutes while I'm driving to my gig, for example. And then I'm performing, and about 45 minutes into the gig is when I go, oh, there's my voice, you know, and it sort of kicks in. So doing some warm-up is better than doing no warm-up at all. And it takes a while to warm it up, actually, but this is going to help get you there a lot better and a lot faster, so that you can present when you need to. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Good. The other thing is care for afterward. The care for afterward is always, always, always become really good friends with warm salt water gargling. Anytime you have to speak in public, anytime you have to speak for any length of time, in fact, afterward, warm salt water gargle. Cup of water that you warm up to, you know, warm, more than tepid, I would say. And about a quarter teaspoon of salt, dissolve the salt in the water, and then gargle like crazy after you've done, because it'll help, because when we're not used to speaking, this becomes tight. It does this because you're nervous, and that's one of the surefire ways to hurt ourselves when we speak or sing or do any kind of vocalizing for any length of time. And that's another tip for me to you. As much as possible, keep this relaxed whenever you're presenting. This needs to be like butter. Okay? Does that make sense? Questions on that? Okay.
Just a kind of point, I have a friend who actually damaged his vocal cords and not making that public when trying to perform. And so it can eventually cause permanent damage.
If you don't warm up properly, yeah. The more you warm up, using good technique, the better. Absolutely. Okay. So we're going to see if we can do this. I'm going to play you something on the second page of your handout.
We got a couple more handouts over this one.
Oh yeah, they're on there.
The other day.
Who needs handouts? There.
Who doesn't have one? I'll grab it. It's okay.
Sure, I'm just wondering.
Mom will share.
I didn't quite get that.
So, who has questions? Because I realize we started a little late, and I want to be sure we get as much as possible to actually working on this. And I'm going to ask you, Catherine, can I go a little bit long?
You can go until, let's see, yeah, we have the room until 1. So, yeah, 10:30, 12:30, we have it until 1 if we need it.
Okay.
We need to have
Everything back.
that in place.
Sounds great. We have plenty of time. All right, because I actually, no, wait, I started at like 11. Oh, I have plenty of time. Good. Okay, so, taking a look at the first part of the second page, take a read through it for a second. And give me a high sign when you are done reading. Just the first part. Give me a high sign or something so when you're finished with it, so we're not waiting. Good, I think everybody's done. So within that, did you get an idea of what it might sound like? Did it sort of have a little voice in your head? Okay.
Bernard Alvarez had somebody on my tail for years, she said matter-of-factly.
Settling into the booth and unwrapping a big green scarf from her neck. Really? Why? I asked, playing along. Fred was right. This woman was unhinged. She pursed her lips and looked at me over the top of her glasses. If you've been talking to Fred, then you know why, she said. You were the one with Jonathan Ivor the other day, weren't you? I nodded. Then you were there, so you know I was there. She was getting excited. I got the last water and soil samples right there at the dock, and you saw me. I stared at her. I saw you there, sure, but I don't know what you were doing. I was getting the last samples. Oh, this is better than I could have asked for, she said, and burst into a beautiful, deep laugh. The press was there to see my last sample collection. What paper did you say you're from? Ocean City Weekly Breeze. It's the Arts and Entertainment Weekly. Her smile dimmed for a fraction of a second. Then she beamed again and said, well, Jamie, you are about to get your big break. The New York Times is going to be knocking at your door because I have got a story to tell you.
Okay, so what do y'all think? Did it sound like it sounded in your head? So this is just one person's take, right? This is just one person's take on how that would be read. Everybody's voice is going to be different. Everybody's voice is going to be utilized differently. And what this was the way, this was the exact way the author wanted it, so you do it the way the author does it if you're doing an audio book for somebody else. If it's your audio book, what you're trying to do is what your vision is. But you have to have your voice ready to do it. So we're going to do a little bit of exercising, looking at what it takes to actually get our voices to start doing what we want them to do. Does that make sense? Because this is about applying good vocal technique, essentially. So, let's see if I'll do it. Ah, it did. That's exciting. Let me get back to here. Okay. So, within our warm-up, we talked a little bit about using the body. Now, we're going to do a little bit of work figuring out what our characters or our writing is going to sound like, and then using the technique to actually get that out there. So for those of you who brought a paragraph, let's go ahead and spend a little time doing this aspect of it. If you write fiction, give your character's voice. Take a minute, and with the characters that you brought in, write out who they are. Are they male or female, young or old? How will they sound? Okay, take a second to do that. And if you don't have anything, think about a favorite poem or a bit of your nonfiction and decide for yourself, what are you trying to say with your paragraph? And that's a really important part of it. What are you trying to say? Are you trying to be light and airy? Are you trying to convince someone of something? Is it dark and foreboding? What is the paragraph that you have? Think about that for a minute. And it can be, if you have a favorite poem, or you want to do Mary Had a Little Lamb, I don't care what it is, but take a minute and decide on a way that you're going to do these things with your paragraph. And once you've got that, I'm going to just leave all this up so that you can see it. Think about the characteristics of these people, if they are people, or the characteristics of what you're trying to write. In other words, for fiction, is the person happy, or are they happy, insecure, outgoing? How does that affect how they might sound? And if it's nonfiction, again, we're talking about the character of what you're trying to say. Happy, sad, convincing, purposeful. What is it that you're trying to say within the framework of the paragraph and within what your voice can and will do? And we're going to try it with everybody in a little bit, but I want you to think about this before we start vocalizing so that you're doing it with purpose. And that's one thing that's really important for all this, is that everything you say as far as your written work, when you're reading it out loud, has to be purposeful. You cannot be purposeless in this. It has to have specific goals and specific benchmarks that you're trying to achieve every time you open your mouth to do any of this stuff. Any of this work is going to take that kind of emotion. Does anyone have any questions while you're working? Anything coming up?
Do you think it's helpful to use accents to distinguish between people, or is it only, like, you just try to keep within the character, I guess?
I will say that has a two-part answer. Yes, absolutely, it's helpful, but only if you can reliably and consistently do the accent. So if you can't, it's much better to read in as standard in English as possible. And you know, it's funny because standard English to people tends to be sort of that Midwest Chicago kind of accent. But Maryland actually has, unless you do the Maryland has a pretty standard accent also, certainly this area of Maryland. However, if you start getting into the South, there is a thing where women who have a Southern accent sound charming. Men who have a Southern accent sound like they're not quite as smart to the ear, which I think is ridiculous because obviously the accent has nothing to do with it. But if you're going to do something like that, be aware that you want to look at how the accent will affect what the listener is hearing.
The accent of the woman voice that play was kind of southern, country southern, and I heard you at the end picked up on the rising note at the end of the almost like a question. Hardly did.
I would also remark that Southern is kind of generic. I can differentiate, because I have Southern relatives, I can differentiate between Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Piedmont, Virginia is different from all of the above. So, don't,
Maryland's got
You know,
about 6 of
feel-
them
yes.
just in my neighborhood.
yeah, it's just as a comment, because
Mhm.
they also, and Texas is different, is not a Southern accent, it's a Texas accent.
Absolutely. And they have, if you ever want to, and I can get you resources if you want them, Paul Behrens, I think is his name, wonderful professor at the University of Pennsylvania, has done a huge project where he has recorded accents from everywhere.
He's got a map too,
Mhm.
right,
Yeah.
where he identifies
Mhm.
where you find each one.
And,
on the internet?
you know, it is
Is it on the
it's on the internet, and I will get you the link to his website. It's fantastic because you can get Northern Georgia, Southern Georgia, Atlanta, North Carolina. You can have different parts of Texas. You can have Irish, different parts of Ireland, English, different parts of English. New York. There's Brooklyn. There's the Bronx. There's South Philly. There's North Philly. You name it, he's got people recorded saying words in that accent, so that if you need to speak in a particular accent, my goodness, you can have actual sort of audio to listen to be able to do that. So what I was doing with Renette, she's Southern Virginia on the coast, and that was the accent, and I had to study how to do her accent because that was part of what the author wanted. Most of the time, if you're reading nonfiction, you're probably not going to want to speak in a particular accent, but if you're doing fiction and your characters come from wildly different backgrounds, absolutely. But you have to be consistent. Okay, how's everybody doing with their paragraphs? Anybody have anything that made them go, huh, I hadn't thought about it that way? Pretty good? Mike?
If you're trying to do an accent, do you recommend sending, like say you have a friend that lives in Boston who has that nice Boston accent. Do you recommend sending them a couple like paragraphs just to ask them to hear how their words sound from them?
Sure. If the thing is, what they also need to be able to do is not just hear it, but to say what you need to change. So if they hear it and they go, well, it sounds kind of close, but I'm not sure, then it's not going to be terribly helpful. It's better for you to train your ear at first anyway, to go, you know, this is what it sounds like to me. What I did when I was studying for some of the more Dundalk accents that are in this book, I actually went to the Dundalk and the Essex Public Libraries, and I just sat there and random people, I would say, excuse me, can I ask you to say something into this recorder? And I actually recorded them saying things. People who sounded like they had that accent to me, and that was part of my reason for doing the audiobook, was what the accents actually sound like, not even the recording that Paul did, but also just going out to the place. And I was at the Double T Diner up there going, okay, hi, you're my waitress and I like you. Could you say something into this recording? I'm recording an audiobook. And that's how I got people to give me the accents. Now, it would be really cool, you know, the next time I have to have like an Italian accent, getting to go to Tuscany would be awesome. Chances are that won't happen. But yeah, that's another thing that you will want to do, depending on where your characters are from, is do the research before you do the audio work. Yeah.
People ever get subconscious about how they're forming their words when you're recording them for them?
Because I ask them questions.
Okay.
I'll actually ask them something about themselves that they would easily be able to answer. So I don't just go, talk. I'll say, can you tell me something? Do you have any pets? Yes, I have a cat. Oh, what's your cat like? What color is it? And then they,
So they're not thinking about the accent.
exactly. And the more you're not thinking about what you're trying to say, and this goes along with any kind of public presentation of your work, the more you're not thinking about all of the techniques that we've just covered, the better off you'll be. Because you want to actually be bringing across the work itself. Okay, so within the framework of all of that, does anybody have any particularly, for fiction, any particularly high voices, child voices, insecure, uncertain voices? Yeah? Okay. How about low voices? Particularly low? How about people who speak really slowly? You guys are totally slowly. What was that?
And softly,
What was that?
slowly and softly.
Slowly and softly. Nice. Okay.
Oh, no.
No, yes. Absolutely. Slowly and softly is great. Absolutely. What about really quickly? Yeah, in your work? Okay. So these are all things we need to think about. I personally am a very fast talker. You might have noticed by trying to listen to me for the last few minutes. I speak quite quickly, and at the same time, most of the time, you can probably understand why. I'm enunciating, I'm articulating every single syllable. I'm not swallowing them, and that's one of the most important things. If I can give you a hint as far as reading the work out loud, it doesn't matter if you speak softly. What matters is if you enunciate clearly. Okay? English is actually my fourth language. I had to learn a bunch of languages before I learned English, which meant by the time I actually got to English, I was pretty good at picking up dialects and how to say things and how to speak, which is great because now I'm pretty good at it. For all the rest of you, quite frankly, it's going to take a little bit more training your ears and also remembering that even if it feels like you are speaking and you are over-enunciating everything, it's probably perfect for the people who are listening to you. So having said that, we're going to do a little vocalizing before we do this to prepare you for actually doing the work. Now, yes?
Something that someone once told me is that try to remember that the people who are listening to you haven't read this 800 times like you have, so they don't know what's coming next, so they need the time to digest it. So that's why it's going slower than almost a little slower than it is natural. Actually,
Most of the time, it's true, unless the author has made the choice. For example, in thrillers and mysteries, things go a little faster because you want that tension. So the next sample that I'm going to play for you is a much slower read for something that was a romance that I was doing. And I read it for her, and again, like Water for Chocolate is what got me the gig. And I read it for her the first time. She said, "That's entirely too fast." And so it slowed down by a good 1.5 times. And she's like, "Yes, that's perfect. Do it like that." And I thought I would be so bored listening to this, even though it's my voice and my project. It's too slow. And she's like, "No, it's perfect. My readers love slow and languid, like they're sitting on the beach with a pina colada and a gorgeous cabana boy is bringing them, peeled grapes." That's what they want. Okay, she knows her audience, good to go. So that's another thing. Know your audience before you present. If it's going to be a lot of people who need you to speak very clearly and enunciate and be quite articulate in the way you're saying things, do that. If it's people like you all who are used to it, I'm speaking a little faster than I normally would, but I'm still enunciating as clearly as I can based on the fact that you all don't know me well. Mike knows how I speak. He knows how to listen to my really rapid-fire delivery, but the rest of you might not, which is one of the reasons we're making all of this available to you by videotape and all of that, so that you can go back and listen if you need to. Yeah.
I have noticed that you speak for like 5, 10, 15 minutes without taking a breath.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how you do that.
I'm a singer, and
Good lungs.
and that whole breathing into the belly is a huge thing. And I'm going to give you another little exercise to do. If you want to expand how well you hold your breath and support with your breath, one of the best ways you can do that is to breathe into the belly and leave the shoulders down. And what you want to do with that is inhale into the belly and exhale out. However, most of the time when we're trying to do that, our shoulders creep up anyway. So here's the way to do it so that you can test yourself. Lie down on your bed, put a book on your belly, and breathe. And you will notice that when you inhale, the book rises, and you exhale, the book falls. Why? Because your shoulders can't move when you're lying down. They can't, they're on the bed. So if you keep this going, and you will eventually get sort of practice of it, and then you can stand up and apply that same way of breathing, it will absolutely revolutionize how long you had and you have to speak before you can take a breath, or before you need to take a breath. Okay, so for those of you who are nonfiction writers, who are the nonfiction writers? Okay, so 4th. Okay. For those of you who are nonfiction writers, in your paragraphs, have you developed a sort of what you're trying to say? Is it convincing people, illustrating something, giving out information? What is it that you are trying to do?
My selection is a story. I'm trying to find something. So it's trying to convey the importance and urgency of the mistake that this author has made.
Okay, good. So you're trying to convey urgency. Nice. Okay. Anybody else?
I guess I chose the opening paragraph of my latest book, and I think I'm basically setting the scene, but I'm also inviting people into my writing process.
Okay, so
And I'm trying to make an intimate connection.
being intimate is one of the most, and doing it immediately is one of the most important things that you can do when you're reading the work out loud. That's going to be a really interesting example, Alice. I'm going to be really interested in that.
Well, you can tell me if I achieved it, because I don't know.
Well, no, and we're gonna try this. The whole point of asking you to bring in a paragraph is that I want to try it with everybody, as many people as we can, so that you get an idea of how to do the process and using your voice and vocalizing before that.
I'm trying to, it's 3 paragraphs really short. I'm trying to ground the reader in a mindset
Okay.
that is like my book that said it doesn't have to be perfect to be good. So I'm weighing a lot of, yes, this went wrong, but it's pretty.
Okay. So here's the thing about what that is, the back and forth. Think about the way that you would speak if you were trying to say this side versus this side. Do you see what I did there vocally? That's the kind of thing that you want to do. So the part that's on the left is always going to be maybe a little bit higher vocally. This is something that we can do for ourselves to help the reader get an idea of what we're trying to do. And this part would always be a little bit lower. And it's almost like that idea of modulating the voice allows us the ability to bring out the information in a way that gives the reader sort of comfort, because you need to hold the reader. The reader who's listening to what you're saying doesn't really know what's coming next, like you said. And giving the reader a nice container, like, I've got this, I've got you, we're going to be good, it's going to be awesome, you're going to love this. Like what you're trying to do with inviting people in, same thing. Does that make sense? Okay, anybody else? Who's our last nonfiction person? How about
Mine's also the first introduction to my story, a memoir about my brother. And really introduces the shocking fact that he's a 52-year-old schizophrenic who died.
Wow. So,
And, we all, my mother and I, thought that he would outlive us, sort of with this pride, trying to get out of it.
okay. And how about the fiction folks? What are you trying to get across?
I have a guilty mother telling her daughter she always her daughter reacted to it. She's 17.
Daughter 17, and how old is the mother?
So like 30.
Okay. And they have a good relationship, not so good relationship? Very good relationship. Is this about to change their relationship? Okay. Okay, so bear that in mind. How she conveys the sense of urgency based on telling that secret. What happens to the vocalizing after versus before? How does especially the daughter change? Her reaction to what her mother says can be vocalized, and what happens to the daughter? Does she grow? Does she pull away? What happens to her afterwards can be impacted and affected through the way Carrie's going to use her voice. Okay? Anybody else? Fiction? Yeah.
Have someone add to TikTok.
Ooh. Candace, I'm going to be looking forward to hearing your voice attitude. That's going to be really fun. Okay, so does that make sense? So when we're thinking about this stuff, we're going to do a few vocalizing exercises to just give you the ability to start applying the characteristics that you've thought about and written up to what you're going to do. So one of the best ways that we can do this is actually physically working the mouth, the teeth, the lips, and the tongue. And one of the best ways you can do that is tongue twisters. So we're going to do a tongue twister, and it's a really simple one. It's minimal animal. And it's on the sheet if you need to read it, the first page. So go ahead and read that. We're just going to do that, and I want to ask you to choose one aspect of what you just wrote up and do minimal animal, minimal animal. We're going to do minimal animal, minimal animal, minimal animal, minimal animal, and do it in the voice of one of the people, or if it's nonfiction, of what the characteristic is that you are trying to convey. Just minimal animal, minimal animal, minimal animal. You can do it for yourselves. Ready? And minimal animal, 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 minimal animal. Okay. So it's a little odd, isn't it? It's a little odd going, I'm saying what looks like nonsense words and trying to convey emotion through it. But you know what? What's most important is not the words at that point. If you're vocalizing it, what's most important, the words will come through. What becomes really important, and this is one of those things, you know, it's like that whole kill your darlings thing. What's really important if you're trying to vocalize is what the intent is of what you're trying to say. That becomes crucial because the words will come across. They're your words. We know you're going to say them. But if you read them in a really wooden way, minimal animal, minimal animal, if your character is supposed to be quite wooden, that works great. But if your character isn't, or if your writer or the person, the point of view person, I guess, isn't supposed to be wooden, but you're nervous and you're doing that, it's going to change how everyone who reads it perceives what you've said. Does that make sense? And also, for example, the book that I played you a minute ago, it was very, it had a very specific take, right? It was very specific. And if you listen to the entire book, you are going to have that take, that perspective as what you take away, because that's what you got. It sort of pushes you into a particular perspective, whether or not you want it to be that way. If you didn't want it to be that way, by time you take the book and you read it. So bear that in mind, that what you're trying to do here is you're trying to get the reader's interest, if you're reading your work out loud versus doing your own audiobook, so that they'll go, oh, I want to know more, right? So this is why characterizing, allowing your voice to do what it does, based on the characters or based on what you're trying to convince them of or illustrate, will allow you to gain their interest more so that they want to actually pick up the book. Does that make sense? Questions on that? Now we're going to move to the next one, red letter, yellow letter. So if you have another point of view, Words don't mean, the words you're saying don't mean anything right now. What matters is what else is happening. So for you, for example, Susan, it would be the other side. The first side versus the other side. Say red leather, yellow leather to yourselves, working that same kind of thing. However, you want to use good technique here, so get our breath in, get yourself seated nice and upright, inhaling into the belly, periscope is working, and red leather, yellow leather. Red All right, so did that one feel different? Other than the fact that it was a different tongue twister, did it feel different to you?
Yeah, you should have done it.
Yeah. Well, and actually what it is there are different tongue twisters that will use different parts of your mouth. So minimal animal will use the very tip. Red leather, yellow leather is sort of the middle. Then one of the next ones is kinky cookie, and that's all back. Kinky cookie, kinky cookie, kinky cookie, kinky cookie, right? So it's all the back of your mouth. All of these need to be warmed up, and this is one of the ways to do it, is to use the tongue twisters to affect change and warming up the instrument like we talked about earlier. So all of these are part of how you would do this, and also it will help you enunciate your words. I spend a lot of time singing Gilbert and Sullivan, so you have to sing super fast, and you still have to enunciate everything, and we all warm up with tongue twisters, because my goodness, you have to have your instrument be ready and facile, able to do exactly what you tell it to do at any moment. The next thing I'm going to tell you is the two-finger rule. Anytime you speak, anytime you're making a vowel, you need to be able to take the tips of your two fingers and put them between your teeth. Now, just the tips. It doesn't have to go past the first vowel. It's just the tips. So I don't know if you've watched my mouth at all. Probably not. You haven't been thinking about it. But my mouth opens down, and here's why. If I speak like this, all I've done now differently is my mouth is more closed. But if I open my mouth more, I start getting louder. So if you want to project, get this idea of the open mouth into the way you speak anytime you're trying to present to people. Drop your jaw, and you will get huge amounts of sound without having to do any extra work. Another way of looking at it is, anybody here besides Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker eat sugar cone ice cream cones when you eat ice cream? Any of you do it? Okay. So you know what they look like. They look like this, right? Imagine that you were 6 years old, and you just got one, and you stuck it all in your mouth. What would happen? Yeah, Luke Skywalker knows. Look at him. He's like, yeah.
You will not eat it all the way on the first gulp.
Nice. Okay. So yeah, you wouldn't eat it that way, but if you did, if you chose to do that, what would happen to your jaw? Now, our jaws have two hinges, right? We have the first, and then we have the second. The more relaxed the jaw, the more far it drops. And this will give you access to, again, a lot of volume without doing any extra work. Make sense? Incidentally, people who have TMJ have some trouble with this. So if you have TMJ issues, be aware that you need to do a fair amount of massaging of this area to get it warmed up enough so that you can do this. But this idea, what Candace was saying, like, what about using our voice? Well, the best things we can do for it is dropping the jaw and applying the two-finger rule. And then doing things like a lot of the exercises that are on the little audio files will help you get to that place, because it's the warm-up we did. It's some vocalizing, some saying of these tongue twisters to get you ready to actually do the reading. Does that make sense? Questions? I know we're covering a ton of stuff. Okay, so moving on. I'm going to ask you to think about, like we've already done, listen to the next example that I'm about to play and think about the narrator and the characterization of these people that you're about to read. So go ahead and read the second set of lines. Notice, if you will, how much shorter it is. It's about a minute long, but the reading itself is a lot shorter. because I vocalize it quite differently. And when you're ready, give me the high sign, and then we'll play it. Everybody done? All right, so take a listen to this.
Mom, look! Claire's eyes went wide as the dish she was drawing slipped from her hands. It collided with the linoleum at her feet and split in two. Elizabeth stepped toward her daughter. Honey, what's wrong? Did you see it? Claire stammered. She followed Claire's gaze out the kitchen window to the house across the way. Evening shadows shrouded the Victorian, its windows dark and dreary.
Okay, yeah. Now we're going on to the next thing, which we don't need to go on. So, what did you think? And I'm not talking about the quality. It doesn't matter what the quality is, whether or not you like it or not. What did you think about the characterization, the voicing, and the narrating?
That sounded about the way I would have read it. That sounded correct.
Okay.
Distinguished instead of accents by the pitch.
Between the characters?
The characters and also the narratives go down.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we're starting to think about the idea of where are we voicing this stuff, right? Was the daughter higher or lower than the mother?
Higher.
Higher. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah, it makes logical sense. Younger people tend to speak high in higher registers than older people. Now, the accents, they weren't different. Why would they not be? Logically speaking, why would these accents be pretty much the same?
Same family.
They're the same family. Chances are they live together. And what was interesting about this book is that actually because of the book itself, even though people are from all parts of the world in this little town where the story takes place, it doesn't seem to matter because it all has to be the same. So even though people are from different places, she still wanted a very specific standard English as I did the reading. Which is a little weird to me because there are people there from Chicago, and there are people there from Florida, and there are people there from New York, and it doesn't matter, that's what she wanted. So I had to convey, and this is something for you all to think about it, everybody in your book, and this is for the fiction folks, if everybody in your book is from all the same place, if it's all a small town kind of tale, be aware that you have to differentiate among the characters in ways that are not accents. Because unless someone is from somewhere else, their accents are going to be quite similar. And we want to be sure that as we're doing this vocalizing and we're reading our work out loud, that we have other ways of characterizing the characters differently. Does that make sense? So the voices end up, for example, they were from the same family, from the same town. The daughter's voice was much higher than the mother's, and the narrator's was even lower than that. Why would you do that? Why would you have a low narrator? To distinguish from dialogue. What else?
It's more formal.
More formal a little bit. What else? Yeah, remember I said that container? That voice that I used that was very low, and letting them sort of, the reader needs to be in this state of, remember the Cabana Boy and the palm fronds? It's this very sort of relaxed, more languid way of speaking. So the narrator herself has to be languid and relaxed because that's the point. And this is not a hard-boiled film noir, book noir kind of detective story. This is a romance, so it's supposed to be this very sort of rich, gooey, vanilla custard kind of voice. So depending on what you write, you want to start thinking about how you're going to characterize all of it. The narrator is really important. Who is your narrator? Do you know? And if it's in the first person, then the vocals of the person when they speak versus when the character, sort of the narration takes place are very important. They have to be similar but not exact. You need to have a different, slightly different take on the character when they're speaking versus when you're getting the character's point of view narration. Does that make sense? Questions on that? Okay. Y'all are doing great. It's amazing to me that you are giving, you're picking all this stuff up so easily. I did not expect it, honestly. I thought we would have a lot more questions. So, the summary we've already talked about. Let's talk a little bit more about breath. Now, what Jim said, I don't ever seem to have to take a breath. It's not true. I take breaths, I do. But the only person I know who does that is, I I heard Johnny Mathis did it too. Barbara Streisand circular breathes when she sings. So she's breathing in, she never actually has to stop to take a breath, which I just adore. But part of it is that I am actually energetically stopping at certain points. And you may not notice that I'm breathing, but I'm carrying the energy through. And that is another part of thinking about narrating. You don't want to say something and then stop. And then say something else and then stop. Can you tell what's happening to the energy as I'm going, right? So if I'm talking, there's a tendency to go da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da. When we do that, if we have that kind of cadence to what we're saying, our readers are going to go, and I'm sleeping. Oh, wait, I'm awake again, and I'm sleeping. So what you want to avoid is that idea of stopping the energy flow. Yes?
But could you use that pacing of speech to differentiate one character from another?
Absolutely. If the characteristics call for it, absolutely. When you have a character who speaks like that, or when you have, for example, I have in my book, I have a very evil, sort of slick character. So he always speaks like this. And when I'm doing it, that energy is always there as part of it. And the key then, Jim, is to make it consistent. So if your character does that, if the energy stops every time the character says something, then you have to make that consistent.
It would be for like almost an older person.
Oh yeah, it could be. Yeah, absolutely. Or anyone who takes a long time to think before they speak. You know, I, for example, tend to be a leap before I look kind of person in that way. I will say stuff and then go, what did I just say? And when you're reading your work out loud, you absolutely have to have all of that in hand before you start, because you cannot, if people are listening to you, you can't keep sort of wondering what you're going to say next. It doesn't work that way. And when you're doing audio work, what they say to you is, what you need to have is, whatever you're reading, you already read a while ago. You're actually about a sentence or two ahead. So you're saying stuff, but you're reading ahead of what you're saying. And it's a weird technique, but you have to sort of start thinking about getting, if not mastering it, at least become a lot more acclimated to using it, because if you're going to be surprised at the end of the line when you think it's going to go to the word right and it goes to the word left, it jars you, right? And we want to be sure that we're not jarred when we're presenting our work. If you're sitting around and reading it out loud with friends, no problem. But if you're presenting your work at a conference, or if you're doing a pitch session, holy moly, your elevator speech better be bang on. And if it's not, if you're going for agents and it's not bang on, they tune out. They tune out within the first 10 seconds. I'm working with a bunch of people right now, teaching them how to get their demos together. And we've been talking about that if you want a commercial demo, you need to have 6 to 8 second snippets of different voices, and it better go like this. Because anybody listening to it, if they are not grabbed within that first 5 to 6 seconds, next. They just don't care. So what we want to be sure of is that we give them enough of an oomph with our voices that whatever work we're presenting shines no matter what. Because your work already shines. As written work, it shines. Now you're going to expand the arena in which you're going to be working. Does that make sense? So because we're expanding it, we want to be sure that we're helping the work listen instead of bringing the work down. And in fact, my problem as a writer, I'll be honest with you, is that I speak really well when it comes to reading my work out loud, so my work seems better than it is. Seriously. Well, except for, I will have people say, huh, it sounded a lot better when you read it out loud. And I've had people say that to me in critique group, right? Because it isn't, exactly. So now I'm like, okay, let me up my writing game, because my speaking game is great, but my writing game needs a little help. But knowing that also, you know, as someone who reads your work out loud, that's important. And one of the things they say to all of us as we're learning how to write is read your work out loud. You know,
How can you tune that out though? If you have this very clear voice in your mind, let's say it's Southern, and it just you know, it feels Southern, and you're going for it, and you're reading to edit, and your readers aren't reading out loud. How do you tune that voice out and just
read it? I don't think you need to. I think the whole point is that you have set up in your book that the voice is Southern, right? The person is Southern. So your readers will actually start imagining the world. Remember we talked about this at the very beginning, that whatever a person is reading, they envision the world. And if you tell me that the person is purple and likes green nail polish, then forever and ever, amen, I'm going to think of the person as being purple and liking green nail polish, until they change the nail polish to chartreuse or something, right? So you tell it to me and I will start envisioning it, I promise.
So it's in the accent. I mean, if I'm drawing a word out, I've got a good draw, and you're drawing a word out, it's gonna get great emphasis, and maybe even funnier than if someone's just looking there and saying, it's
Purple, okay.
whatever.
So, okay,
If it's
then,
purple person, I say, well, it's purple.
okay.
Yellow.
So what would you do? What would you do as a writer? And this is getting us a little off topic, but what would you do as a writer if you knew that your character needed to say,
That's permit out.
yeah, you would pull it out. You might say he drawled instead of he said. You could change the word a little bit to characterize it for yourself. So it wouldn't be necessarily he snapped. You could have drawled it, and that's a great way of informing the writing, actually. Yeah.
I've often read writing in vernacular, whatever that happens with you, or an accent. It's a slippery slope.
And in fact, one of the things that they say is if you're going to do it in an audiobook, because I've done audiobooks and narrations where they want an accent, if they have it written out too much, it limits the ability of the person to understand it. And for me to read it out loud, it's limited, but also the person trying to read it, if they don't know that you mean purple when you wrote down P-H-P-L-E-E-E, if they don't know that the word is supposed to be purple, you've lost them. So I agree with you completely. Don't write in vernacular, but, writers should write what they're going to write.
If I may, you might take a hint from some of the Southern writers like Flannery O'Connor, who didn't try to transmit the accent, but did transmit the word pattern. The grandmother didn't want to go to Georgia.
But it's easier if you really are, because to you, that's a normal thing. To me, if I'm from the South and it's purple, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And I spell it P-U-R-P-L-E, but if you heard the audio, it wouldn't be purple.
I would do it like once if it's really important to the story, but I wouldn't hang up on it too
Yeah.
The
much.
thing is, if that's the punchline, if you will, you could even all cap it, or, it doesn't have to be spelled out the way it would sound, but somehow emphasize
It's not that, it's
or
that,
draw it out.
that's like just a word, and it's a characterization, you're moving into the character, and you get this lilting feel if you know how it's being said, but if you don't, that lilt isn't there, and other people are reading it, and it's not flowing as nicely and interestingly for them as it was for you, because you heard it with that lilt.
And what's interesting about that, I will get to you, Mike, what's interesting about what you're saying, Candace, is that this lends itself really well to something like an audiobook,
Yeah.
because then you do get, it's another level of reading, if you will, because then you're getting that, this is how it would be read. The author wanted it that way, or if you read your own, if you wanted to say, or whatever the word is, then the audiobook allows for that facet of it to shine, essentially, to come forward. And I think that's great. It may not be conveyed as easily in the written word, except for the fact that if you characterize it a certain way in the writing, then the reader gets to envision it. But once you have an audiobook, or even a sample, or as part of your trailer, for example, that's one of the things that's happening a lot now. Authors are doing trailers of their books, so you get snippets of the characters as part of the trailer, and then that colors the way you read the book, because you start hearing it in that voice. So that's another way. Yes, Mike?
I think a really good example of that is Frank McCourt's Tis. I don't know if anybody have read it. He's an Irish writer, but the whole thing is written, there's barely any punctuation, completely done from the Irish voice. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a very difficult read. And it would be even harder to read aloud if you're not familiar with their dialect at all.
But then if you are from there, it rings very true.
Absolutely.
So
It's perfect.
So you have to decide who your audience is, or who are you writing for.
Yeah, and that's a lot of it as far as doing the audio also. Who are you going to try and snag with the audio, whatever it is? If you're reading the work out loud or if you're reading your own audio book to record it, both are true. So, last few things, I hope, before we go on to the actual reading of our stuff. Breathing, using your diaphragm, very important. And remember, of all things, that they're here to hear you. If you're presenting your work out loud, no one is there to heckle you about it. My husband is a clown, he used to be a clown at the circus. He gets heckled. Why? Because he's a clown. We're writers. We're not going to get heckled. Do you see what I'm saying? So bear that in mind, that when you're in there, you're inviting them into your world for a little while, and they want to be there. So if you look at it like we're a bunch of friends and I'm going to talk with you and introduce you to this world that I've created, or if it's a nonfiction work, this aspect of life that I want to talk about, then by God, let's do that. And it's going to be awesome. And the more of that kind of perspective you bring to the work, the more the audience, whoever's listening to you, is going to love what you do. Questions on that? Yeah. Okay.
I had a question, I thought you had a question too.
Okay.
If people laugh, there's a thing about timing that I guess comedians know about timing. And you weren't really necessarily ready for the laugh, but okay, they laugh. What the heck do you do? My tendency would be just keep running right on through it. But I know that comedians have some kind of pause, and I don't think that they wait until the last laugh is done. But I don't know what the timing should be.
There's an art to it. So there's the explosion of laughter, and then go on. And it becomes a flow kind of thing. It becomes a lot easier once you've gotten a little bit of exposure to standing up in front of people and doing it. Because if you laugh, you're not going to stop laughing. It's, especially, I do this thing where I go to the silent laugh, and then I'm gone for a good 30, 40 seconds. I'm not going to stop. Yes, Obi-Wan.
He needs to go to the bathroom.
What happened to that?
Having done stand-up comedy, and I can kind of attest to what she said, when you hear the laugh, you kind of know it's coming. So you just kind of acknowledge it. You can smile, you can laugh with them, but just you're listening for the volume. And as Izolda pointed out, there's kind of an arc. It's a big volume, and if you can hear it start to die down, that's when you kind of pick it up. It's kind of like surfing. So you just let the audience have their moment, and then you kind of jump right back into it. And you can acknowledge it any way you want. You can just say thank you. You can just continue reading. We're both fans of a comedian, Eddie Izzard, and he if you want to see somebody who is a master at timing comedy, he has got his stuff down to he knows exactly how long people will laugh for.
And what's interesting about him is that he acknowledges how intelligent his audience has been for laughing. The guy's a master. He'll say something and he'll come back to it. He'll do a callback 20 minutes later. He'll do a bit that's a callback to something he did 20 minutes ago. People laugh and he'll look at us all, well remembered. And he'll go on. And you're like, I remembered something, Eddie Izzard. He has us in the palm of his hand. We are so excited that we are with him every step of the way. He doesn't just acknowledge that we're awesome, that I'm awesome. He doesn't acknowledge that he's awesome. He acknowledges that the audience is awesome for knowing it, for being with him. And that's that connection that is so amazing when you're standing up in front of people and talking. Because I'm not trying to talk at you, I'm trying to talk with you. This has to be a dialogue, even if I'm presenting my written work. Because if it's not, if I completely close off and I'm just doing this, then I have no idea how to gauge what else is going on out there. And if you've all fallen asleep or left, I'm in trouble. Okay, questions? Yeah?
When you're speaking, you're very still, physically.
Am I?
Like, not in a bad way, but you look grounded to me. You're not like shifting your weight or pacing or whatever. Do you doing that on purpose, and what are you doing to find that sort of quiet place that looks like you're speaking from?
Okay, so I'm not at all still. I'm having minute changes of focus and center everywhere. And Mike told me, don't go out of this frame, so I'm not. Otherwise, I'm a walker.
Okay.
I have to walk a lot. And not because I'm nervous, but because I want to be sure that I'm getting in everybody's viewpoint so that they can actually see me and hear me and be connected to everyone in the room. Because if I didn't have a don't go out of this frame, what was that, Mike?
No,
Okay.
it's for me.
Okay, so if I didn't have this, Mike had said, don't go past this, I'd be walking around talking to Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan sometimes too, because it's a way of connecting with my audience. Whoever the people are that I'm talking to, if you're talking to a huge room, by the way, it doesn't matter if you're talking to a huge room. You need to be sure that as the person presenting, that if there's 2 people or if there are 200 people, that you are going to reach every single one of them. The way to do that is, of course, eye contact, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Eye contact and projection. Now, when I project, I'm projecting relatively small because this is a small room, and I have a pretty big voice, and I'm not trying to go very far. But if I want to talk somewhere else, I choose a focal point, and that's one of the most important things. If I have a big room to fill and I don't have a mic, for example, I won't just speak just to you. My focus will actually be the very corners of the room, and you'll hear that as I focus on the corners of the room, my voice gets louder and I seem to get a little bigger because I'm trying to make myself bigger. By the way, nothing wrong with being bigger when you're presenting up on stage. The bigger you are, the more attention you will get. If you're teeny tiny and small, energetically, you might get some, but you want to be as huge as you can. How am I grounding? I imagine sort of a silver cord from the base of my spine down into the bedrock below, past the floor, past the soil, into the bedrock, and I imagine it tying there and sort of holding me nice and steady. And that's how I personally ground, however it is you ground. Some people like to wear specific socks because if you feel nice, whatever it is. I imagine that sort of connection between me and as far deep as I can get so that I don't ever have to worry about my stability. I'm always going to be into that stable space. Does that answer the question? Okay. Yeah?
Do you have any suggestions for when you're reading? I find I have to keep my eyes on the page so that I don't break the concentration. But if I look up, then I go back and I don't necessarily, sometimes I'll actually use my finger to follow along. But is there a good balance of, when you're speaking extemporaneously, you can have lots of eye contact. But when you're reading, how do you balance the eye contact with keeping your place?
Okay, so keeping your finger on something is great. Reading ahead, do you remember how I said read ahead a couple of sentences? So your eyes have seen a couple of sentences ahead, so that if I am speaking, I'm not just speaking what I'm reading. Can't do that. I have to have read a couple of sentences ahead, so that if I lift my head up and I remember where I was on the page, or keep my finger on it, I've read a couple sentences ahead, and I make eye contact with everybody, and then I come back down. The other thing is, if you read from your book, it's different than if you read from a device like this. Here's why. And anybody have iPads or something like it? Luke Skywalker has an iPad. There's a wonderful app. I'm going to share it with you right now. It's called, let's hope I have a copy of it here. I might not. Let's see if I do. No, I don't. It's called Prompster, and it's a teleprompter app that actually, it is, and it will take the text and you can make it as big as you want, and it goes at the rate you want it to go, and you just have a teleprompter right on your device. So, and I think it costs like $1.99 or something, and I thought I had it on here, but I have it on one of my other iPads. I'm an iPad hoarder. I have to make them, so I do. It's sad, but it's true. Anyway, so yeah, that's another way of doing it, is have whatever text that you actually ride up on a prompter, and that way you don't have to worry about it. It'll be going, and whatever's at the top is what you read next. So that's another way of doing it. I have a really good memory, so I tend to memorize very easily. So I will have huge sort of swaths of things memorized, and I'll be able to read them from memory while I'm doing it. Not everybody has that, but that's another way of doing it. Questions? Okay. So voice, non-voice consonants, real quickly. Another way of building facility with your mouth is to remember that we have lots of different consonants we can say, and consonants are, they're yuck. I'll just say they're yuck. Consonants get in the way of projection, because most consonants you're not going to want to carry on. You never say, I love you, right? You go, I love you, right? So get rid of your consonants as quickly as possible when you're enunciating. That's another little trick for you to do. And we have voice versus non-voice consonants, and they come in pairs, and you want to be sure that when you're reading your work out loud, that you do not confuse your P's and your B's, your K's and your G's. So we're going to do a quick little exercise. P-B. Pa-ba, 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 pa-ba. Ready? Pa-ba, 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 pa-ba. Ta-da, ta-da is another voice, non-voice pair. Ta-da, 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 ta-da. Ka-ga, ka-ga. Ka-ga, 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 ka-ga. Fa-va, fa-va. Fa-va, 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 fa-va. And my favorite, sa-za, sa-za. Sa-za, 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 sa-za. There are lots of them, actually. We don't think about them as being in pairs, but they're there, and if you are not enunciating properly, you will come across as voicing K's or not voicing G's, for example, and you want to avoid that as much as possible because it causes confusion for the reader. Questions? Okay. Yes?
It was a Spanish guy speaking English. I ran into this guy, and he said his name was Vernon. And really, his name is Vernon, but the Spanish guy, so he is speaking. Do we do that in voiceover?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. As much as possible, you try to be authentic unless there is a reason for the character not to be authentic.
Okay, how about in the writing, when we're writing? Would I write him as Vernon or as Vernon?
You would write him as Vernon with a B, but in Spanish, the B is pronounced like a very soft B.
Yes.
So you would say me llamo Vernon. You wouldn't say me llamo Vernon, right? Or Vernon, I guess. So yeah, you would write it with the B because that's his name.
Okay.
And remember, books are sometimes limited by that.
I'm sorry.
Because if somebody knows that the Spanish pronunciation would be, I'm going to take this bottle of water. Sorry in advance, I have to, because I'm all out of water and I need more. So in that way, you're saying Vernon, and because you're writing Vernon, and it would be said with a B sound because that's how in Spanish you would do it. If a reader doesn't know that, then they will have a slightly less authentic experience, but it's their experience and it's authentic for them, so it's okay. Questions? All right. So, succeeding. Confidence. No one wants you to fail. They want you to tell them what the world is like. That's huge about this. The more we think about this as, I'm going to have them really enjoy this, and we're going to share this, and it's going to be terrific, the more that's going to come across. Being nervous is a natural part of standing up in front of people and talking. Absolutely, it's natural. We all get a little nervous. Barbra Streisand didn't perform live for decades because of her debilitating stage fright. Okay, she didn't perform live. So we all knew her stuff, but she never got in front of an audience for decades. And for me, I'm like, okay, if Barbra Streisand can have stage fright, it's okay that I can. But at the same time, we can't let that stop us, right? The whole point of sharing our work is that we want people to read what we've written or listen to it. So we do have to sort of remember that we're getting to introduce them to this really cool world that has never existed before we wrote about it. Whatever it is, whatever perspective it is, nonfiction or fiction, your perspective on editing, for example, Catherine, no one has had it. My goodness, you're getting to share something no one else has seen, you know? The same thing, you know, with fiction. Whatever world you've created, if it's a small town or if it's on another planet, it's the one that you're getting to share with your audience. And the more we do, the better off we'll all be, because we're all enriched for the experience. Questions on that? Okay. Know what you'll say before you step up to the mic. And the positive self-talk cannot be overstressed. You got to tell yourself you can do it. Because you walk into it going, I'm going to suck, I'm going to suck, I'm going to suck. You're going to trip over something and fall flat on your face. Now, here's the thing about tripping over something and falling flat on your face. I've gotten up to perform in front of 2,000 people, and I'm performing one of my own songs. And in the middle of the song, I completely forget what my name is, much less what the heck the next lyrics are. And I'll literally go, you know, you'd think since I wrote the song that I remember the words to the song, but it looks like I don't. And I'll go, okay, 2 to tango, take 2. And I'll start over. Why? Because it's my time on stage. I'm here to share with you. And if they wanted it perfectly, they'd buy the CD. Bear that in mind. You will screw up. You will. No question. Doesn't matter. The point is not whether or not you screw up. The point is you're there to share something really amazing with the people who come to see you. Please let go of any worry you have about whether or not you're going to screw up. You will. And it does not matter. What matters is you're there to do it, you're live in person, you can make the connection with your audience, and the more you do that kind of self-talk, that I'm here to share something really incredible with you all, the more your audience will be receptive, and even if you do mess up, they'll be with you anyway.
Cool.
I
He's my
don't
little
think
brother.
filming counts as the, I think it's fine.
Okay, cool. Nice. All right, so,
It's just
yes.
good to have it, so
Sign
you
in.
know, who's our cameraman? Please sign in.
Yes, sign in, and if you are not an MWA member, pay your $5.
I'll be back in February.
Awesome, that's right, he's presenting in February, and he's presenting our crowdfunding, and that'll be really cool. All right, so, what we're gonna do is, and Candace, if you would like to go first, I would love for you to do that, so that you, before you have to leave, can do it. Candace is like,
Did I
no.
volunteer for that?
You did.
You did.
So here's what I'm gonna ask you to do. You have your stuff written out. You've thought a little bit about the characters. And those of you who are here, take a listen to Candace. Candace is gonna go first. Did you get an idea from the exercise I asked you to do about it, what you'd like to do and how you'd like to do it? Okay, what I'm gonna ask you to do is take a read through once. Just read it to yourself, and then read through out loud, and we're all gonna listen, and then we're all gonna give you our support, and that's it. I don't want any feedback of any kind right now. Let's not do that. What we're trying to do is give support to, hey, she's out there reading the work out loud. Just with everybody who wants to do it. And then I'm gonna give you some constructive feedback on what you've done and how you might change it up a little bit if you need it. You could be awesome and perfect on the first try. But if you need a little bit of guidance on that, that's what I'm gonna be here to do. Okay, so read it to yourself once, and then go ahead and breathe deep, using the techniques we've talked about. Do a read voice. If she wants to, I would give it to her when she's ready to do it.
So here's the question I have, since we're recording, we can stop it here and just let everybody else who sees it afterwards not see you reading, or we can share your readings, it's up to you.
And if you want to share your readings, you'll need to come up and stand up here, where I can stand. And now the card is right. It's up to you. If you want to be recorded doing your reading, you can. If not, stay right where you are. What do you all think? Let's take it to a vote. Okay. Those of you who want to, let's. Those of you who don't, stay seated. How's that? Is that cool? Okay.
Should I wait for Alex?
No, I think go ahead.
Okay. So, she's blowing my whole friggin' schedule. She's soaking both my brand new chairs, and does she say sorry? Hell no. First thing out this thing's mouth when she flops down, she says, I'm diabetic, I gotta go get a nosh. So she stands up and has the nerve to ask, can you tell me where to go? Oh, Lord. I have got to remind tell her exactly where to go. But I'm trying to be cool. I don't know what the hell a nosh is. I figured she's got the sugars like my Uncle Bubba. Then this nosh means she's looking for a private place to poke her finger. So I say, ladies' room is down the hall to your right.
Nicely done.
And I
So,
apologize.
first things first, I'm gonna go first. Candace, lovely job, lovely job. I enjoyed the heck out of the different voices. Could you all tell the different voices? Beautifully done. You can definitely tell who's pissed. And you can definitely tell who's sort of the gentle woman, if you will, who's a little who needs a notch. I love it. What I would suggest is everybody else give your, if you have a couple words to say about what you saw, and then I will give a couple of comments.
I thought you did the humor at the end very well. I And that can be hard to do.
Yeah.
That important punctuation. That was great. Very good.
I thought the whole thing was funny, the way you read it. I like it.
Like an image great. Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was beautifully, beautifully done. Things to think about. When you're differentiating between characters, and you did a really great job on that, when you're differentiating between characters, you want to think about how different is it going to be consistently? Because you started out beautifully consistent, and towards the end, it kind of divorced from the book.
This year, my husband and I will celebrate our 10th wedding anniversary. At this point, my memories of our wedding are a little hazy. I can still feel the panic in the pit of my stomach when my veil fell apart minutes before the ceremony, and my relief when my mom saved the day with a stapler. I can remember wondering why there was no music. Turned out our trumpeter was stuck in traffic. I can see the look on my beloved's face when he first saw me. He looked awfully stern, but he told me later he was trying to keep it together. And I clearly recall that as soon as our priest said the words husband and wife, I started to laugh. I knew at that moment that the day was a success, that whatever happened from here on in, we were going home married. I felt that the months of effort were fulfilled in that moment, and the rest of the day was a celebration. Was it perfect? No. The curried vegetables had no curry. A third of the guests didn't get their favors, and I had staples in my veil. So it was not perfect, but it was wonderful.
Nice.